you made fried eggs? Cool. We'll be starting soon. I'm just getting everything all situated. But isn't that when we make the best stuff, though, Toga? Ruthbane and I have not eaten yet. We're gonna have chips and cheese after the stream. Unfortunately, he got out of work a little late. So, that's okay. Because I had a big lunch today, so I'm not really too hungry. Alright. Ruthbane is grabbing a monster from the kitchen, and once he is with us, we will get started. And I have a cat trying to get into the bedroom. No, I know, don't worry. Ruthbane is being very slow getting that monster, isn't he? Hurry up! Yeah, I hear you cackling in the hall. Come on. People are waiting. People are waiting.
I know people are waiting.
Don't stand out in the hall cackling. Yeah, he thinks he's so funny. He thinks he's so funny. Yeah, you're cute. You're cute.
Yeah. Is that what you're thinking? You saw something. Okay. I'm gonna turn my attention to this hangout stream.
Have you chosen your stories?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm?
I said, have you chosen your stories?
Have I chosen a story?
Yes. Anyway.
Now I have.
Alright, we're gonna get started now. Can everybody hear me okay? Considering we're telling stories, that's kind of important.
Can you hear the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Can we get some confirmation?
Have you chosen any out of this?
No.
No? Anything good?
I didn't really look too much at that book. I kind of thought they were a little too long. Toga says hi.
Hello? Hello, Toga.
Okay, well, I think that confirms that we are heard well enough. Okay. So, the first one is one that I wrote. We're going to start with the two that I wrote.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. First one I'm going to read is one that Rickbane really liked, called Frozen Specters. Okay. Charlie Becker led a simple life. He is 30 years old. He works as an accountant, an honest one, if one can believe such a thing exists. He drives an older 2008 Buick that he's kept in fairly good working order. He isn't married and has no children, though, should time and his schedule allow it, he would be open to the idea. He pays his bills on time. He has no enemies to scorn his name, and a select number of friends that he plays cards with on the weekends. The only shadow in Charlie's simple and ordinary life is the mysterious death of his father, Harold Becker. Charlie's mother had passed away when Charlie was 16, so Harold lived out his retirement in their lovely old home by himself. It was the strangest thing. No one could explain it. One day, 10 years ago, Harold was found on the floor of his living room, covered in frost, his green eyes wide with terror, his skin a soft, pale blue, his teeth chattering as he managed to force out 4 words that made absolutely no sense to any of the paramedics attempting to save him. Never forgive, never forget. Although it was winter, the house's thermostat read a cozy 70 degrees. And beyond the frost that covered Harold and a few inches of the floor around him, the room was perfectly warm. So what caused the frozen corpse of Harold Becker? That is a question that remains heavy on Charlie Becker's mind as he sits upon the sofa in front of his brick fireplace, sipping at a mug of hot chocolate. He thinks about his father every year on the anniversary of his death, but tonight feels especially forlorn. What was it about 10 years that made such an impact on a great many things? However, it felt more almost ominous. He felt like he was sitting up waiting for something or for someone. Taking a sip of his hot chocolate, Charlie shook his head as if to reassure himself that he was being ridiculous. He didn't believe in such superstitions, regardless of how bizarre his father's death had been. His sensibilities would just not permit it. As the time on the clock hanging above the wall on the fireplace marked midnight, Charlie turned stunned green eyes towards his front door as the faint sounds of knocking could be heard. At first, Charlie thought he'd been hallucinating this, that the eerie wails of the winter storm outside was getting to him. But then he heard the knocking again, louder this time, much more clear. Who in the blazes would be out at midnight in the middle of this mess? Charlie mumbled to himself in disbelief. However, how could he not open the door? What if someone was in trouble? Setting aside his hot chocolate as the knocking came once more, Charlie rose from the sofa and made his way to the door. He took a deep breath to ward off the strange, ominous feelings that plagued him, reminding himself again that he was being childish. And he unclicked the lock turned the handle, and opened the door. He recoiled at first from the gust of cold that burst into the space. But his eyes readjusted, and he took in a woman. She looked to be in her mid-30s. She wore a long brown tweed coat, black mittens, and an old-looking pair of black winter boots. Clutching her hand was a young boy. He couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old. He wore a red coat that looked as though it had been patched in a few areas. His black snow pants looked much the same. His black boots looked like they were long past due for replacing. His mittens had holes in them in places. They both looked positively freezing. "Please, can you help us? We were evicted from our apartment. The whole building was sold. They just kicked us all out. I just need somewhere for my son and I to spend the night until the buses start running again in the morning. Then we can go to my sister's. Please, can we just spend the night by the fire in your living room? We won't make any trouble, I promise." Normally, Charlie would have been against inviting strangers into his home. However, the woman's pleading eyes held nothing but sincerity and sorrow. So much sorrow. These two had obviously been through quite a lot. Yeah, come on in. Have a seat on the sofa. I'll get some warm blankets and make some more hot chocolate, Charlie said, stepping aside to allow them in. It went against everything his father would have done. Harold Becker had been a hard ass. He had not believed in any kind of charity. Charlie's mother had always taught him differently. You don't need to do that. It's enough just to be warm for the night before our journey. No, it's all right. I was feeling restless anyway. And besides, I'm sure your son at least could use something to warm him up. And I think I might have some old mittens in good condition that might fit him, Charlie reassured her, guiding her and the boy over to the sofa. He gave the boy a kind smile before returning his focus to the mother. "You are so kind and generous. Thank you so much," the woman murmured, eyeing Charlie's face in a way that could only be described as immense curiosity. "It's no problem. What kind of world would this be if we didn't care about each other a little bit?" Charlie said, walking out then with a smile to go about finding extra blankets, mittens for the boy, and then finding some more hot chocolate for his guests. Charlie stayed up until at least 3 o'clock in the morning talking to the mother and son. He sat in the armchair while the other two cuddled close on the sofa under the warm, fluffy blanket that Charlie had brought for them. As the clock marked 3 a.m., however, the tone began to change. It was eerie, this feeling in the air, but it was not malevolent. The air around the mother and son grew cold, so very cold, as if the fire still crackling away in the fireplace was doing nothing to ward off the chill. Charlie looked at the two curiously. The color in their skin began to drain away to a dull, icy blue. Frost coated the strands of their hair and eyelashes. Charlie was frozen with fear in his chair. He couldn't move at all. "I am not going to hurt you, Charlie Becker. You are different. You are not like your father. Your heart is not cruel as his was." He never told anyone, did he? I'm sure you knew your father used to own an apartment building 10 years ago. But did he tell you that my son and I came to his home to seek shelter for the night after we were evicted? There was a storm, just like this one. Mark and I, we had nowhere to go until the buses started running again. But he turned us away. He said it was our own fault for not being prepared, and that if we froze to death, that was our fate. And he shut the door on us. Mark and I sat where the exhaust from the heat leaves the house, hoping to last until morning. But the storm, the wind was so harsh and so cold. We got so tired. We went to sleep. I remember thinking that everything was Harold Becker's fault. He did this to us. Never forgive, never forget. I vowed vengeance. I thought eye for an eye. I thought to snuff out his son as well as he had snuffed out mine. But, Charlie muttered fearfully, his eyes wide as teacup saucers. You did not know, and you are not like him. You do not deserve to be punished. Thank you for reminding me that some good people still exist. Before his very eyes, the mother and son began to fade, little by little, until the blanket that covered them fell flat against the seats of the sofa, and the icy outlines of their bodies were left behind upon the backrest. No one will ever believe me, Charlie muttered to himself. And that is Frozen Spectres.
Ooh.
Austin, did you want to take a turn, or do you want me to read the next story?
Yeah, I got a small one.
Okay. Rithbane's going to take a turn, and then I have another story that I wrote.
Okay. This one I found super quick, super easy, super small. The last man in the world sat on his couch in his living room, and he heard a knock on the door. That's it.
Oh, jeez. Is that it?
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, jeez.
The last man in the world was sitting on his couch, and then he heard the knock on the door.
Did you want to tell another one? Because that was like...
Huh?
Did you want to tell another one?
No, go ahead.
Oh, jeez.
I said it was going to be super fast.
Oh, jeez. Okay. You're weird. Did you get the doc link that I sent you?
Yeah, there's several here. I found one here. But that one's like 2-minute read, so I can do that one in a little bit.
Okay. This next one that I wrote is called The Girl with the Pink Coat. Max Hooper was your classic introvert nerd. He liked playing Dungeons and Dragons. His favorite games were the Legend of Zelda series, and his circle of friends, while small, were pretty awesome. So you can imagine his displeasure when his party-loving cousin was visiting the family for a month, that she bullied him into accompanying her to a party. His parents insisted it would do him some good to get some more social interaction with people his age outside of the small circle he frequented. He disagreed, but accompanied his cousin anyway, rationalizing it would make his parents stop nagging him, and his cousin would be going home soon anyway, so he wouldn't have to put up with her for much longer. The party, however, was unfortunately exactly what Max was suspecting it would be. Loud, obnoxious music, young adults grinding their bodies together and drinking far too much liquor than they reasonably should be. Max asked his cousin to leave the party with him, claiming the environment did not feel safe to him. But she had already latched herself onto some buff jock-looking fellow and waved him off, saying to just go and she'd get a ride home. He tried to argue, but the meathead she was kissing on told him to get lost or get sore. Fine. He tried. He didn't want something to happen to her, but he wasn't going to get a beat down for it. Not when he didn't even want to be here in the first place. So, he got into his 2003 Honda and started on his way home, reminding himself about the detour they had to take on the way here on account of construction. He would have to take that one creepy back road. He hated that road. Everyone did. Everyone said it gave them the creeps. Fog had begun to roll in as well from the coast, giving this already creepy road an even eerier vibe. Austin, you are distracting me. Part of him wanted to leave this stretch behind him as quickly as possible, but the more rational side of his brain dictated that trying to rush in these conditions would only put him in danger. And the next moment, drops of rain began to fall upon the windshield. Oh, great. The forecast didn't say rain, Max grumbled, slowing his speed just a bit more out of sense of caution. It was a good thing he did too, because what began as light sprinkling quickly turned down into a roaring downpour within minutes. I'm sorry. Perfect. Just perfect, Max said with a heavy sigh. I didn't even want to be out tonight. I have a campaign to finish working on. Any thoughts about D&D, however, did not last long in the young man's thoughts. As he saw through the distorting water upon his windshield a smear of pink by the side of the road, he slowed down a bit and rolled down the passenger side window. He saw a young woman. She looked about 18 to maybe 20 years old, right around his age range. She wore light blue denim jeans and a light pink puffy jacket. Her long blonde hair was drenched with rain, and it looked as though she had been crying. Had she left the same party? Why was she crying? Did she need help? Hey, Max called out the window. Pulling up by her, she looked frightened at first. Do you need some help? It's pouring out here and the fog is so thick. Can I give you a ride home? The girl hesitated, looking unsure if she should. But she looked up at the sky and down the foggy road with a grimace, before she looked at the open window and nodded, murmuring softly, "Yes, please, thank you." She got in the car, and Max was quick to roll up the window to avoid her getting any more wet. Here, let me turn on the heat so you can get warm and maybe dry off some, he said, flicking on the heat. So where do you live? 3112 Swan Avenue, the girl replied. Thank you again for stopping. It's been a terrible night, the girl murmured. Her voice was so soft. Hold on a sec. That coat is drenched. I have a blanket in the back seat. Let me stop for a second and get that for you. You don't want to get sick, Max said, pulling the car to a stop long enough to reach back for the blanket and handing it to the girl. Here, switch out the coat for this until we get you home. Thank you, she said, smiling at Max, doing as he suggested. Max wasn't sure if it was just the fact that it was dark and foggy out, but the girl's skin looked so pale, like she hadn't seen sunlight in years. Perhaps she was an introvert like himself and didn't like going out much. So, what is your name? And what were you doing out here all by yourself in such gloomy weather? Max inquired curiously. My name is Ann Bakers, and my boyfriend had invited me to a party. But when I got there, I caught him kissing another girl. I left right away. I couldn't bear to confront him, not in front of all those people, she murmured miserably. What a scumbag. I'm so sorry, Anne, Max replied, giving her a sympathetic smile. Well, I'll get you home safe. Will there be someone home to take care of you? My mom, Anne replied with a nod. I'll be so happy to see her. Max nodded. Do you want me to walk you to the door? Because I can. I don't mind. Anne smiled and shook her head gently. You are so sweet, but no, I'll be all right. The rest of the drive was filled with small little questions back and forth between the two, learning a little bit about the other, until they turned into Swan Avenue. Anne's face lit up like she was receiving the gift she'd always wanted. There, that's my house right there, she said excitedly, pointing at a tan and brick house. The lights were on inside, and there was what looked like some sort of SUV in the driveway. You can let me out here. Thank you so much, Max. I will never forget you. She practically jumped out of the car before another word could be spoken and sped towards the house. It was hard to see with the way the rain was pouring down the glass of the passenger window, but he almost thought he saw Anne go right through the front door. That, however, was absurd. He looked at the seat and noticed then that Anne had left behind her puffy pink jacket. He fetched it and parked himself in her driveway. Exiting the vehicle, he hurried up to her front door and knocked. A woman answered the door. She looked at Max curiously. Can I help you, young man? She noticed then a puffy pink jacket in his hands. Where did you get that? I just gave your daughter Anne a ride home. She left this in my car. I almost took off before I realized she hadn't grabbed it, Max said, offering the jacket. The woman didn't reach for it. She instead looked bewildered at Max. Young man, My daughter Anne has been dead for a year now. She was hit by a car, but this is hers, I'm sure of it. How did you get this? But I just had a girl named Anne in my car just a moment ago. She was wearing that. It was soaked. I gave her a blanket. Out the corner of his eye, he could see around the woman. On the sofa was his blanket. And that is the girl in the pink coat. Did you have one you wanted to read, Austin?
Oh yeah, I did. We just want that other one to just kind of set a little.
Why is it still saying World of Warcraft? I edited that.
I don't know. I probably gotta.
Who knows? But now it's Rithbane's turn to read a story.
Alright. This one is called The Family Photo. There was a single mother who had 3 daughters. The youngest daughter was diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumor. The doctors broke the bad news to her mother. They told the poor woman that her daughter only had 3 months to live. The family were devastated by the horrible news. The mother decided to have a family photo taken while her youngest daughter was still alive. That way, they would always have something to remember her by. They hired a professional photographer, to come and take the photo. The family posed with the youngest daughter sitting in the middle of the picture and her mother and the older sisters arranged around her. Afterwards, they had it framed and hung it over the fireplace in the living room. 3 months later, the youngest daughter died in the hospital. Her mother and her 2 sisters were at her bedside when she passed away. The funeral took place 2 days later. After the funeral, the mother was sitting in the living room when she happened to glance up at the family photo over the fireplace. She was horrified to discover that her daughter's face in the photo was shifting and changing. It looked distended and deformed, almost demonic. They brought the family photo to the professional photographer and complained. He said he had no explanation for why the photo would suddenly change, making the dead child appear so grotesque. The mother was at her wit's end. She took the family photo to a psychic and begged the psychic to tell her what was wrong. The psychic took one look at the family photo and recoiled in horror. "I'm sorry to have to tell you this," said the psychic. "Unfortunately, your daughter fell to hell." And that is the family photo.
Okay.
Yeah.
This one I found online, and it's called The Mother. When my sister Betsy and I were kids, our family lived for a while in a charming old farmhouse. We loved exploring its dusty corners and climbing the apple tree in our backyard. But our favorite thing was the ghost. We called her Mother because she seemed so kind and nurturing. Some mornings, Betsy and I would wake up, and on each of our nightstands we'd find a cup that hadn't been there the night before. Mother had left them there, worried that we'd get thirsty during the night. She just wanted to take care of us. Among the house's original furnishings was an antique wooden chair, which we kept against the back wall of the living room. Whenever we were preoccupied, watching TV or playing a game, Mother would inch that chair forward across the room toward us. Sometimes she'd manage to move it all the way to the center of the room. We always felt sad putting it back against the wall. Mother just wanted to be near us. Years later, long after we'd moved out, I found an old newspaper article about the farmhouse's original occupant, a widow. She'd murdered her 2 children by giving them each a cup of poisoned milk before bed. Then she'd hanged herself. The article included a photo of the farmhouse's living room with a woman's body hanging from a beam. Beneath her, knocked over, was that old wooden chair, placed exactly in the center of the living room. Did you want to take a turn, Austin?
Oh, I can take a turn.
Why do you keep laughing? Why do you keep laughing?
Just Toga's reaction to the family photo. It's like, chills. What? Why? That's a mystery. Why? This one is called Death Cab. In Argentina. Argentina?
Yes.
In Argentina, there's an urban legend that has spread by word of mouth. People take taxis every day. It's something you do almost without thinking. If it is late or is it raining, you might hail a cab to take you to your destination. However, in Argentina? Okay, I'm sorry. They say that you should never hail a cab outside a cemetery. If you do, you may unknowingly be stepping into the dreaded Taxi de los Muertos.
You actually pronounced that right.
The death cab. Legend has it that this supernatural taxi of death lurks outside cemeteries, waiting for an unwitting victim to get inside. As the story goes, a young Argentinian woman named Claudia was on her way home one night. She had left work quite late and it was raining heavily. She was too tired to walk all the way to her apartment, so she decided to take a taxi home instead. As she walked down the lonely street that led past the cemetery, she suddenly saw a taxi coming towards her. She held out her hand and hailed the cab. When it stopped, climbed, and gave the driver her address. Sitting in the back seat, wiping the rain off her brow, she suddenly began to feel very cold, much colder than she had ever felt before. Looking around, she noticed that the windows were covered with ice. It was then that she realized they were going the wrong way. She was about to say something to the driver when she caught sight of his hands on the steering wheel. His skin was pale and leathery, and his fingers were almost skeletal. She couldn't see his face in the rearview mirror. "We're going the wrong way," she blurted out. The driver didn't answer. He just kept on driving as if he hadn't heard a word she said. When she raised her hand to touch his shoulder, the driver slowly turned his head. Claudia screamed out in horror. His face looked like a corpse. The skin was withered and clung tightly to the bones. She tried to open the back door and jump out, but the door handle came off in her hands. She tried to put the window down, but the button didn't work. She saw a young couple walking down the street, so she shouted to them and banged on the window, trying to attract their attention. They didn't hear her. Claudia became frantic, desperate to escape. She attacked the driver to try to scratch his face with her nails. His rotting skin came off in her hand, revealing the gleaming skull underneath. The taxi began to speed up, going faster and faster along the rain-soaked city streets. Claudia looked behind her, and on the back window she saw a sign that read, "Prepare to die." Claudia never seen again.
Was never seen again.
Yeah, was never seen again. No one knows for certain whether or not this urban legend is true. The only ones who know for sure are the people who have been kidnapped by the death cab, and they can never tell us what happened to them. We may never know, But just in case, take care and keep your wits about you. If you are walking by a cemetery, never ever call a cab. That one's actually pretty good. I like that one. That's the first time I read that, and I was getting chills. I was like, holy shit.
Alright. Here's another one I found online. This one's called The Wallpaper.
Wow, the ones that I've read, both of them are like, they end in tragedy.
We bought an old house, my boyfriend and I. He's in charge of the new construction, converting the kitchen into the master bedroom, for instance, while I'm on wallpaper removal duty. The previous owner papered every wall and ceiling. Removing it is brutal, but oddly satisfying. The best feeling is getting a long peel, similar to when your skin is peeling from a sunburn. I don't know about you, but I kind of make a game of peeling. On the hunt for the longest piece before it rips. Under a corner section of paper in every room is a person's name and date. Curiosity got the best of me one night when I Googled one of the names and discovered the person was actually a missing person. The missing date matching the date under the wallpaper. The next day, I made a list of all the names and dates. Sure enough, each name was a missing person with dates to match. We notified the police, who naturally sent out the crime scene team. I overheard one text say, "Yup, it's human." Human? What's human? Ma'am, where is the material you removed from the walls? That isn't wallpaper you were removing.
Oh, that one's a good one.
Did you want to read another one, or did you want me to read the Winthrop Peacock?
I'm gonna read another one.
Okay.
Okay. The 13 steps down to hell were located in Maltby Cemetery in Washington. There used to be a staircase that began at ground level and descended down under the earth. It was said to be low-grade entrance to the tomb of a wealthy local family. According to the legend, you had to go to the cemetery late at night and walk down these 13 steps. While descending the steps, you wouldn't be able to hear anything. Once you had reached the bottom, if you turned around, you would be confronted by a vision of hell. They say that the vision would drive you insane. Those who watched people performing this ritual said that they witnessed a person stop at the bottom, turn around, and then collapse to their knees in horror. According to some reports, several children emerged nearly comatose from the steps. Many of them never uttered another word. The 13 steps no longer exist. As the story goes, they were bulldozed or filled in with concrete years ago. Since then, there have been no trespassing limitations on the cemetery, and even rumors of kids making expeditions late at night to Maltby Cemetery armed with shovels, hoping to unearth the 13 steps down to hell. My girlfriend and I wanted to see this for ourselves. You have to go down these 13 steps and then you see a little chair. If you sit in the chair, it automatically means that you have sold your soul to the devil. It sounds really creepy. I was at church with my friend, and his pastor said that he went there when he was 16 years old, and it was the worst experience of his entire life. A group of us headed out to the cemetery in Maltby. We made sure we got there as close to midnight as possible. After about an hour of searching around in the dark, we finally found it. The 13 steps. In the moonlight, we couldn't see the bottom. We tried using a flashlight, and we could still not see the bottom. It was frightening, and one of the girls was so freaked out that she couldn't even look down into the staircase. I decided I was going to go for it, but as I walked down the first 2 steps, I started to feel sick. After the next 2 steps, I felt lightheaded. When I got to the 6th step, I became so cold that I could barely breathe, and I could hear muffled yelling and screaming. I was not going any further. I couldn't even take another step. When I turned to climb back up, I could feel something pushing on my back, and I couldn't see out up to my friends clearly. When I finally reached the top of the staircase, I realized the yelling and screaming was coming from my friends. They were screaming that I had disappeared when I went down. I am 6 feet tall. I couldn't have been out of sight after having only gone down halfway down. Needless to say, we were all completely freaked out and got out of there as quickly as possible. To this day, every now and then, I dreamed about the 13 steps that led down to hell, and I always wake up in a cold sweat. And that is the 13 steps.
Yep. Okay. This one is called the Winthrop Peacock. Can you hear me that, honey?
Yeah. It's floating.
Yeah, you're cute. You're cute. I bought a new house in the small town of Winthrop. The house was cheap, but the most important part was that I needed to get away from the city. A few months ago, I had a run-in with a stalker. While I had managed to get him arrested, I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes just constantly watching me. I felt like there were eyes everywhere, at home and on the street. So I decided to move out into the country, to somewhere with less people, just for peace of mind. The house itself was big and somewhat old, but otherwise very welcoming. The agent who introduced me to the house had been required to mention that a serial killer had lived here in the past, which is why the house was so cheap. However, he and later my next-door neighbor, Sarah, both told me to pay the thought no mind. 4 owners had lived in the house since then, and all of them were very happy with it. I loved the house. Its interior furnishings were beautiful and very comfortable. The people of Winthrop were friendly, often bringing over freshly baked pastries or inviting me for dinner. Get-togethers, they said, was the key to making sure that everybody who lived in Winthrop loved it there. Yet, after a week, I stopped loving it. The feeling of someone watching returned, worse than before. I tried to ignore it, but as soon as I started feeling of someone watching, I started losing sleep. Giant bags grew under my eyes, and I began yawning almost as much as I breathed. Sarah was kind enough to let me stay in her house for a few nights. It was during this time that I heard the legend of Forrest Carter, the serial killer who had lived in my house. While no one knows his exact kill count, Carter, also known as the Winthrop Peacock, was a man with an extreme severe case of narcissism. Legends say he couldn't fall asleep if he didn't feel like he was being watched. He was finally arrested for putting up a scarecrow to watch him during the night. Only it wasn't a scarecrow. Carter had murdered a 17-year-old girl just so her corpse could stare at him. The story gave me shivers. And after I went home, I felt like there were hundreds of eyes just watching me no matter how I turned. Today, however, was the first day that I acted out. I was cooking breakfast when I felt the eyes. Instinctively, out of fear, I threw my kitchen knife, which lodged itself in the wall. As I pulled it out, I found myself staring at a pair of eyes, pickling in formaldehyde. I've been watching the police peel away the drywall of my house for hours now. So far, they've found 142 pairs of eyes in little glass jars. The scariest thing is, each and every one was staring at me.
Like, wow.
Yeah. Your turn.
Alright. This one is called Twist Ending. There was a famous author named David who had written quite a few best-selling horror novels. All of the literary critics praised his talent for plot twist and surprise endings. He received a large amount of fan mail every day, and some budding authors even sent him manuscripts in the hopes that he would help them get their work published. While David took pleasure in responding to letters from his fans, he took even more pleasure in stealing the ideas of amateur writers. If he came across a manuscript with a great idea for a scary story, he would use it in one of his own books and deny the author any credit. Then, in order to hide his theft, he pulled some strings with his friends in the publishing industry to make sure that the original author never got anything published in the future. One day, David received a new manuscript in the mail. It was bound in a beautiful hardcover book. He read the first chapter and he felt that he knew how the story would end. As he continued reading, he became more and more certain that he could guess the twist ending. It was growing late, but he wanted to finish reading the manuscript to see whether or not he was right. When David came to the final chapter, he realized that the last few pages of the book were stuck together. Anxious to read further, he pulled the pages apart. He felt increasingly tired, but he still kept reading. Finally, he came to the end of the book. It was exactly the twist ending he had anticipated. The husband had hanged himself just as his wife was committing suicide in the next room. David made a mental note to steal the idea and use it in his next story. Just then, he noticed that after the words "the end," there was a little handwritten comment from the author. It read, "I already know that you are planning to steal the ideas in the story. I know because you did the exact same thing to me the last time I sent you a manuscript. You published it under your own name and didn't give me any credit. You ripped me off and blacklisted me in the industry. Nobody will accept my novels anymore, and I will never again be able to publish anything I write. You have ruined my life, and now I'm going to have my revenge. You had pulled apart the back pages in order to read this, didn't you? Well, those pages contained poison, arsenic, to be precise. If you are feeling tired, that is normal. It's one of the symptoms of arsenic poisoning. Soon your heartbeat will get slower and slower until it eventually stops permanently. Don't bother calling an ambulance. You'll be dead before they arrive. You have already been exposed for too long. Goodbye, David. Some twist endings can be very hard to predict." Oh, yeah.
All right. This last one that we're going to read, I was saving for last because from what I was reading about this actually happened to somebody. It's a real experience from a user who called himself Theater Guy. It's called Look at Me. One evening, when I was in my junior year of high school, my mom and dad went out, leaving me home alone. I had a lot of homework to do, so I spent the whole evening sitting at the desk in my bedroom. My parents left the house around 6 p.m. While I was doing my homework, I put on my headphones and listened to loud music. There was a big storm that night, and my desk was facing the window, so I could see the rain and the lightning outside. My parents got back around 11 p.m. When I saw their car drive up, I took off the headphones. As soon as my mom opened the front door and came inside, I heard her shout my name. "What on earth happened in here?" she demanded in an angry voice. Confused, I ran downstairs. My mom was standing in the hallway with a furious look on her face. She pointed at the floor and yelled, "Was this you?" I looked down and saw that the carpet was covered in muddy footprints. "I have no idea how those got there," I said. "I spent the whole night at my desk doing my homework." I watched as the look on her face changed from anger to confusion and then to fear. We both realized it at the same time. Someone else must have been in the house. We followed the trail of footprints, trying to make sense of the whole situation. They started at the back door, which we usually left unlocked, and we noticed something else. The footprints started at the back door, but there was no trail of footprints leaving through the back door. All of a sudden, we hear something loud, a pounding noise that echoed throughout the house. Then the sound of the front door being wrenched open and slammed shut again. Wham! We all ran into the garage and locked the door behind us. My mom took out her cell phone and called the police. "Please come quickly," she shouted. "Someone's in our house." After what seemed like hours, a patrol car arrived with 2 police officers, a male and a female. One officer stayed with us in the garage while his partner went through the house, searching it room by room. When she came back, the female officer told us that no one was in the house and it was safe to go back in. As we were all breathing a sigh of relief, she asked, "Whose bedroom is upstairs on the left?" My parents looked at me. "It's mine," I told the officer. She asked us to follow her. As we walked through the house, we could see the trail of muddy footprints leading from the back door, through the living room, through the hallway, up the stairs, into my parents' bedroom, and then towards my room. They stopped at my doorway. The female officer pointed at my door, which had been open the whole night. Scrawled on it in black marker was the following: 8:47, I see you. 8:53, you forgot to lock the back door. 8:59, you seem focused. 9:24, turn around. 9:47, look at me. 10:15, look at me. 10:37, look at me. 10:49, look at me. For more than 2 hours, someone had been standing in my doorway, watching me. To this day, I still shudder to think what would have happened if I had turned around.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, apparently this actually happened to somebody. Holy crap. Alright.
Oh. That one's actually a pretty good one, too.
Yeah, but that one actually happened.
Oh, jeez.
That was fun. I hope everybody enjoyed the stories. We had a good hour of spooky fun.
That's why I never leave my door open. Yeah.
Me either. My door is always... If I think that no one else is home, my door is always locked.
At night, I gotta sit there and get up because John will forget to lock the door. And it's like, yeah, because I don't want anybody coming inside and giving me a little diddler-do while I'm sitting there sleeping.
A little diddler-do?
Yeah, a little diddler-do. You know what that is, right?
No, I don't.
It's a little diddle.
I don't want to know. I don't want to know what a diddle is.
Where they tickle the gooch.
I just shut up. No one wants to hear about your gooch. Shut up. Alright.
It's called a diddle-do.
Shut up. Have a great Halloween, everybody, or what's left of it. And I will see you in the next video. I think I'm going to be well enough to start recording again. I'm right now sucking on a cough drop, but I've been getting over a pretty bad cold, so that's why I didn't release an ASMR video today. I wanted to release a special Halloween themed one, but I didn't really trust myself to be able to do it without coughing. And I didn't want the sounds of a cough drop in my mouth to catch on the mic. But anyways, I am happy that you guys decided to, stop by and have a listen to the stories. Good night and have a great Halloween.